Hello and welcome. It's so good to have you here with us today. In times of trial and difficulty, it is natural to wonder, why is this happening, God? And the book of Job is, I think, often overlooked. It's one of the books that I have found the most meaningful to me personally. And it answers and grapples with all kinds of questions that many of us are often afraid to. Often as Christians, I find, perhaps especially today, the big and tough questions that we and others have are given sort of simplistic answers. Although let go and let God may be true, it isn't of much help actually to someone who has lost everything. It may be the right answer, but it doesn't tell us how to get there. It's like someone asking how to drive and us responding, well, you just be safe and you follow the law. Again, it may be sound advice, but only if one already knows how to be safe and what the laws actually are. The answer may not always be what we want it to be. I mean, who wants to follow the speed limit when they're in a rush to get somewhere? But I think that Job shows us a very honest example of a man who has lost everything. He asks God everything that is on his mind. And the portion that we read today is sort of the Coles Notes version. It gets right to the point. We're missing all kinds of background here, and I'm hoping that you have a little bit of that kind of as knowledge already. But I would encourage you to go back or read for the first time earlier in Job and get really a fuller picture of the exchange that's going on here. So we'll be reading from Job 39, verses 26 to chapter 40, verse 5. Is it by your understanding that the hawk soars and spreads his wings toward the south? And now this is God speaking to Job. Is it at your command that the eagle mounts south? Is it your command that he makes his nest on high? On the rocks he dwells and makes his home, on the rocky crag and the stronghold. From there he spies out the prey. His eyes behold it from far away. His young ones suck up blood, and where the slain are, there is he. And the Lord said to Job, shall a fault finder contend with the Almighty? He who argues with God, let him answer it. Then Job answered the Lord and said, behold, I am of small account. What shall I answer you? I lay my hand on my mouth. I have spoken once and will not answer, twice, but will proceed no further. What Job shows here is not something that we want to admit. In fact, until God addresses Job, neither does he. He challenges God and says that he wants to plead his case. But he recognizes and encounters the living God suddenly, and none of his excuses are enough. By all counts, Job has lived a far better life than I have. He's able to say with confidence that he always gave to the poor as they needed. He was just to everyone who he encountered. He loved and treated his family with care and generosity, and he refused to curse God, even in the worst of circumstances. Even when his family, his wealth, his health are all taken away from him, he refuses to curse God. Yet, even with all of that, Job realizes that God is far greater than he is. It's like a picture that a small child draws. Of course, we love it and it brings us great joy, but it isn't all that art can be. Indeed, if we are loving, we will encourage them to keep on learning and growing, not pretending that they've learned all that they can and that they've reached the absolute summit. When God sees us, even those of us as righteous as Job was, He wants us to know that there is still so much that we don't understand. If there are simple things in the world around us that we can't understand, like where animals come from and go, and how the many, many natural wonders that God knows about, how they work, why they're there, is it not likely that God knows what he's doing even when it's painful? Is it not likely that God understands things to a greater extent than we do? God doesn't at any point undermine the pain that Job is in, or just tell him to shut up and obey. He asks him questions. And now, these are deep and probing questions, and of course, I don't expect that God thinks that Job will be able to respond to them. But he isn't trying to silence Job by bullying him. What he does want to do is make it so that Job understands that he is working with things that we cannot understand. And this is why it is so important to know God. As we read last Sunday in Genesis 1, God is good, and everything that he does and creates is good. And that means that even when we are suffering, even when we cannot understand, even when we cry out to God and yell, "Why?" God is still working for the good of those who love him. This does not mean that it is easy or that it does not hurt. Job tears his clothing. He covers himself in ashes and mourns for all that he's lost. But what it does mean, and what we need to be reminded of, and what Job is reminded of in this passage, is that God is in control. We are called to trust God and to recognize that he is wise and good and loving. And he is in control far beyond our wildest and most hopeful imaginings of him.